Hi, friends, and welcome back. This is Brooke here, and I have another grid journal spread for you guys. It's been a little while since I've posted one of these. We've been deep in the Play Along Journal series, and in that series, I work inside a couple handmade art journals. If you haven't checked that out already, make sure to go check that out. And there are almost 30 weeks of that put up so far. So make sure that you're checking that out. And I think you guys will love that series as well. So today in my grid journal, I want to kind of get into some black gesso here, but in a way that I'm going to try to keep it nice and vibrant as well. So I'm actually going to start out with my black gesso, and I'm going to kind of put that down as a base in some of these little squares here. So grid journaling is so fun because it just breaks up your page already for you. You know, we have that blank page syndrome where it's like we really don't know where to start or what to do. And I don't know, these little squares can just be really inspirational. I like to use grid journaling as either like a warm up to get going, or oftentimes, if I have like a little bit of extra paint from something else, I'll just use that color palette I already have going and create a little grid journal spread. Another fun thing to do, which I have not played around with all that much, is take these little grids as inspiration, that take the compositions and put them into larger pieces of artwork. So there are so many different fun things that you can explore with this grid journaling practice. So the other thing you can check out in the description below, I have a free grid journal template that you can print out that can help you to draw your own grids on your pages. Otherwise, I often will just take something the size of the box that I want to create and then just trace around it. I also created different cardboard templates for myself as well. I really love black gesso as opposed to black paint. In fact, I hardly ever find myself just reaching for a black paint. I really like how dark and opaque it is. And the other thing is, I really like how fast that it dries. And I think it's just my preferred black paint at this point. I've gotten a little base of that black gesso down, and I dried it mostly but not entirely. And so now I'm going to come in and bring in some of those white or brighter colors, and see how they can kind of work with that black gesso. So they're kind of opposite to what you would normally think of when you're doing kind of dark with that black gesso. So I just want to play with those ideas of what we can do to really bring in that high level of contrast, maybe do things that are a bit unexpected. And I really like the idea of the super opaque dark with also those really bright and vibrant colors. So I have colors already out on my paint palette here, and I'm sticking with those pinks and oranges, and I know that those are all going to kind of go together and blend really nicely, so I don't have to think too much about the color mixing. And on this one, I'm not doing really any pre-mixing of colors. I'm just letting those colors kind of blend and flow into each other within the grids itself. So some of these paints are mixing with the black a little bit, but I'm okay with that. I did dry those almost mostly because I didn't want the black to take over when I was putting these other colors in. Black, especially black gesso, is very bossy. So it's going to take over whatever you're doing for your color mixing. And so I wanted to make sure that it was mostly dry so that I can come in and add these other colors and then they stay nice and vibrant, because I have to go back to that was kind of my goal in the first place. I'm using a combination of my paintbrush and my fingers to kind of blend in these colors. So I don't have too much of a game plan as far as the composition goes with these, but rather just kind of playing and having fun and seeing what comes in each square. I'm wanting to bring some like asymmetrical symmetry, asymmetrical balance throughout this whole page. So I look at each block individually on what the composition is like. But for me, I also really like to look at what this whole page, this whole 2-page spread looks like together. So I'm thinking about that as I'm putting my colors on the page, how much of a color I'm putting down, what techniques I'm doing, what marks I'm doing, and kind of spreading those out with some sort of balance across the page. So that doesn't mean that I have to do the exact same thing in each square. It doesn't mean that I have to do the exact same thing in the lower left corner as the lower right corner, for example. But I can just kind of pinpoint some of those strategies that I'm doing, maybe some of those colors that are really standing out, and just making sure that they're kind of spread across that 2-page spread that I'm working on in a nice and pleasing way. So I'm not totally dominating one side with one color and the other side with another color. So for me, this is just how I like to work, that I'm working on each individual square, but also looking at the whole entire spread as a piece of artwork in itself. It's very similar to how I work when I work in a handmade art journal. Of course, I think about each spread on its own, but also the entire journal. I kind of want to flow seamlessly with each other. But that's a total personal preference. And over time, I think you'll just start to realize how you work. And instead of fighting it all the time, thinking that we have to be something different, that we have to make art in a certain way, we can just embrace what our instincts are telling us to do. Like, we think back as when we were kids and we were creating art, if we were artistic in any way, we didn't stop and just question ourselves all the time, like, why am I choosing this color? Why am I doing this here? But instead, we let those instincts of just playing kind of take over. And that's something that I really try to embrace in my art practice. And I like to call it an art practice for that very reason. It's a practice. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to come super naturally, where we can stop the thoughts in our head and just kind of let our hands do the work. And I wouldn't even say that I'm completely doing that here, because I'm always kind of thinking about composition and design. That's just how my personal brain works. But I have also found ways to embrace that sense of play in the different stages of what I work. For example, oftentimes in the beginning layers, I've really been trying to practice letting go a little bit more and just letting the marks come as they may, letting the colors and whatever. Because after those initial stages, we can do more work that really layers it up. Um, but I think we just have to give ourselves that opportunity to play. And that's really what's going to advance us in our artistic journey, is by letting ourselves kind of just have a good time rather than having that constant critique going on. If you're anything like me, I always have an inner monologue going no matter what. Even if I'm at my most relaxed state, I have that inner monologue going on in my brain. So it really is something that I have to try to practice getting out of my head a little bit. And that's really not always the easiest thing to do, but um I think if we continue to work on it, it's going to come easier and easier to us. So now I'm wanting to make sure that I'm bringing in some really nice light and bright white into these grids as well. I love the black that I've done, but I also want to have that really high contrast, um, difference going on in the blocks of having the bright with the dark. If you're curious about the paint colors and the supplies that I am using, make sure to check out the description below. I will try to link all of the supplies that I use down there. I'm really excited. I've been really busy in my beta class right now. So that is the BB Art Journals beta class, and I am coming out with a master class at the end of this year, towards the end of this year. I've not announced any dates or anything yet, but this master class is going to be everything art journals related, everything handmade art journals related. So here I'm working in a store-bought book, which I think there's a time and a place for. I work in both store-bought journals and handmade journals. So if you've seen other handmade journals of mine, make sure to get on that wait list, get on my email list, because the wait list will have a opportunity to get in at a lower rate than everybody else and enroll and claim their spots first. So I'm not going to continue talking about that too much, but if that sounds like something that's going to be up your alley, make sure to get on that wait list. I'll put that link down below. So you can see me here. I'm kind of holding up my journal a little bit. I was. And I think that's kind of important. And it depends really on how your lighting is wherever you're working. And sometimes when I'm recording here on camera, I have to make sure that I'm not leaning too far forward, which is one of my normal instincts while I work. I kind of get really like close to the page and stuff. So I think it's really important to change up your perspective. So for me, sometimes the lights hit it just in a way that I can't quite see what's going on. And overall, just changing up your perspective with how you work is a really good thing. Along the lines of that, if you feel yourself getting stuck and you're just fighting against yourself, maybe stop that spread. Come back to it later. See things with fresh eyes, because I can almost guarantee you that something that you're totally struggling with, that you're really starting to actually hate what you're doing, if you come back to it with fresh eyes and kind of see it in a new light, you're going to have a different sort of appreciation for it. And 9 times out of 10, when I feel that way and I come back to it, I can see the beauty in it again. I can see the value, and I can almost see more clearly the things that I should do to, I don't want to say fix it, but make it better, to maybe bring it back in the direction that I wanted to take it in the first place, whatever that direction may be. So sometimes distancing ourselves from it, whether it's literally holding the journal a little ways back from our face, or time-wise, distancing ourselves from it and coming back later, both of those things can be extremely helpful in gaining a different perspective of our work. So I'm continuing to work in this kind of a splotchy type style where I'm really blending those colors on the page, and with my paintbrush and with my fingers as well. I just find that you can get different marks and different feelings when you combine both your brush and your fingertips. Sometimes I don't always want those brush strokes, and so then that's when I come in with my finger. You can also explore different tools like a catalyst tool, which almost acts as like a stiff rubber spatula, or different tools like that that can help you achieve different looks. And those are just going to be things that over time you start to realize what your preferred methods are, and you can kind of just play around with the look that you get at different stages by doing different things. So I added in some scribble marks with my pencil, and now I thought some splatter marks would be really fun. Splatter marks are so unpredictable though, so when you're working in a grid journal like this, it's kind of hard to keep them within those grids, but I decided that that was okay. The splotches were better than not having them, and so I was just okay with it kind of getting across the page a little bit. I'm trying to touch it up a little bit, but once that pigment's on the page, it's pretty much going to stay. I could, of course, always go over that later with some white gesso or something if it really bothered me that the page had other stuff on it. But I thought that those splatter marks would add just a fun little touch that I haven't really done in the grid journal up to this point. So I'm adding in some more of that pigment, and this is with my Stabilo All. And I really like any water-soluble mark-making supplies. I think they're some of my go-tos and favorites that I come back to often. I love the idea of the pigment coming out of something that's like a pencil or a crayon and moving that pigment around on the page almost like it was a paint or a watercolor. So I like to explore with that. And I will say my Stabilo All pencil is my number one go-to supply when I'm wanting to add a little bit of grunge into whatever work that I'm doing. Along the same lines, a Stabilo Woody is really nice. It's essentially the same thing, but it's a really thick colored pencil crayon type thing versus a skinny pencil. So I'm wanting to add just a few little final marks into this page. And I debated back and forth whether I wanted to leave it how it was, because I do really like how it is right at this stage, or if I wanted to come in and add some art marks with my white correction pen. I ultimately decided to add in some of these marks, and looking at it back now in the video, I think it acts almost as like a nice highlight, and I'm adding that into some of those dark areas. So this is something that it's kind of scary at the end, because if you really enjoy the way that it's looking, that next step that you do is either going to bring it to the next level, or it's going to be something like, "Ooh, I wish that I hadn't done that." So it's kind of hard. Those risks are things that we have to take, but our art journal is the perfect place to explore those things, because in the end, we can just close our journal and move on. It's okay if it's not perfect. So these are two pieces I had done previously that I kind of took as inspiration for this grid journal spread. So I'm so happy to have you guys here with me, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. So I will see you next time, and I hope that you have a good one.